The airport buzzed with impatient footsteps and rolling suitcases as passengers lined up to board. Near the front, a black teenage girl clutched her boarding pass, excitement flickering in her eyes. She had dreamed of this trip for weeks, but that dream shattered the moment she reached the gate. The flight attendant, lips pressed into a cold smirk, eyed her ticket with suspicion. "First class?" she scoffed, her tone dripping with disbelief. She tilted her head as though amused, then shook it slowly. "Nice try, sweetheart. These aren't for people like you." The girl froze, words caught in her throat as the attendant's hand tore through the crisp paper. The sound of ripping echoed like thunder in the silent terminal. Passengers gasped, phones tilted upward, eyes wide with shock. The girl's hands trembled, but she stood tall, refusing to let the tears spill. The attendant tossed the shredded pieces into the trash, as though discarding trash itself. "Step aside," she ordered coldly, waving forward the next passenger. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked away in discomfort, others whispered, and a few raised their cameras higher, capturing the cruelty unfolding in plain sight. But the cruel humiliation was only the beginning, and no one expected how this story would end. The polished marble floors of the international terminal reflected the glare of golden light from towering windows. Travelers dressed in designer suits and crisp blazers strolled past with rolling luggage worth more than some cars. Their eyes drifted toward the gate, where whispers clung to the air like smoke. The ripped boarding pass was still fresh in everyone's mind. The black girl stood frozen, her chest rising and falling in sharp breaths, the sting of humiliation burning her cheeks. She tried to speak, her voice trembling but firm. "That was my ticket. It was valid. Please check your system." But her words were drowned beneath the attendant's sharp command, "Security!" Two uniformed guards appeared almost instantly, their radios crackling as they approached with mechanical precision. Passengers shifted uneasily, some muttering, others recording discreetly on their phones. The girl raised her hands slightly, as though surrendering to a crime she hadn't committed. "I didn't do anything wrong," she pleaded, her voice breaking under the weight of disbelief. The crowd stared, silent but complicit. A mother clutched her child closer. A businessman shook his head as though the sight confirmed his worst assumptions. The air grew heavier with each second, the humiliation pressing down on her like a storm cloud. Her eyes darted around, searching for just one ally, one voice willing to speak up. But the silence was louder than the flight attendant's cutting tone. "Step aside. You're holding up the line." Passengers shuffled forward reluctantly, avoiding her gaze, eager to protect their own comfort. And there she stood, a young girl stripped of dignity in the very space that promised luxury and respect. But what happened next would flip the power dynamic in a way no one at that gate could forget. To the flight attendant, this wasn't just another day at work. It was another chance to remind the world of the power she thought she held. Her name was Brenda, and for years she had walked the polished aisles of luxury flights with her chin high and her eyes sharp, scanning for anyone who didn't fit the image she believed belonged in first class. In her mind, she wasn't prejudiced. She was protecting standards. That was the excuse she gave herself every time she turned away a passenger whose clothes weren't expensive enough, whose accent wasn't polished enough, whose skin didn't match her unspoken checklist. "Just doing my job," she would tell supervisors whenever complaints arose. And there had been complaints, more than a few. Whispered stories of a mother humiliated, a young man denied service, a family asked to prove they belonged in the seats they had purchased. Yet Brenda had survived them all. She prided herself on never backing down, on being the final gatekeeper to the exclusive world of first-class luxury. Each small act of quiet cruelty fed her sense of importance, even as it chipped away at the dignity of others. As she tore up the ticket, a flicker of satisfaction had crossed her face. The same satisfaction she had felt countless times before. She believed she had once again put someone in their place, protecting the sacred space from what she imagined as imposters. But what Brenda didn't know was that this time would be different. This time, her arrogance had targeted the wrong person at the wrong moment, under the watchful eyes of too many witnesses. And unlike the passengers she had silenced in the past, this girl's story was far from over. But this time, her arrogance would backfire more spectacularly than ever before. The girl's name was Maya, and behind her quiet strength lay a story few in that airport could ever imagine. She wasn't just another teenager clutching a ticket. She was the daughter of a man who had clawed his way up from nothing, a man who knew too well what it meant to be told he didn't belong. Maya had grown up in a home filled not with privilege first, but with perseverance. She remembered her father's long nights at the kitchen table, papers spread across the surface, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet burning with determination. He had faced rejection after rejection in his early career, denied jobs and promotions not because of lack of talent, but because of the color of his skin. Through sacrifice, brilliance, and relentless will, he built something greater than any of his detractors could have imagined, an airline of his own. From a small fleet to one of the most respected names in aviation, he had proven the doubters wrong. And though his empire now spanned continents, he never let Maya forget where he came from. Despite her father's success, Maya was raised to remain humble. While her classmates bragged about vacations and designer clothes, she quietly focused on her studies, pouring herself into books, languages, and dreams of seeing the world with her own eyes. She believed in hard work, in earning respect, in carrying dignity no matter the circumstance. That was why, in that airport, she didn't scream when her ticket was torn. She didn't curse or lash out. She stood steady, her heart pounding but her head held high, remembering her father's words. They may try to strip you of respect, but never let them take your dignity. Passengers at the gate only saw a teenager, small and vulnerable. They couldn't see the weight of resilience carried in her chest, or the legacy of a man who had turned rejection into power. And yet, despite her quiet strength, nothing could prepare the flight attendant for the truth about who this girl really was. Two uniformed guards closed in on Maya, their heavy boots thudding against the glossy floor. One reached for her arm, the other gestured toward a side corridor as though escorting a criminal. The crowd shifted, uneasy murmurs rising like a low hum. Phones angled higher, recording every moment, every word. Maya's voice cracked as she tried to explain. "Please, just check the system. My name is on the passenger list." Her words carried desperation, but the attendant only folded her arms and sneered. "Enough with the lies. People like you are always trying to sneak into places you don't belong." The words stung sharper than the ticket's tear. A few passengers gasped, but no one stepped forward. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. Others whispered into their phones, narrating the cruelty as it unfolded. A man in a tailored suit muttered under his breath, "Scammers these days," and shook his head with disdain. The guards pressed forward. "Miss, you need to come with us," one said sternly. Maya's heart raced. She could feel the weight of eyes judging her, the sting of assumptions cutting deeper than the humiliation itself. She wanted to vanish, to escape the suffocating silence that surrounded her. Still, she stood her ground, her fists clenched at her sides. "I bought that ticket. It was mine. You have no right." But her voice was swallowed by the rustle of the line moving forward, by the impatient sighs of travelers eager to board. Step by step, they guided her away from the gate, her dignity dragged across the polished floor like discarded luggage. She heard a child whisper, "Why are they taking her?" The mother shushed quickly, pulling the child closer. Maya's chest burned with anger and despair. The injustice was too heavy to bear alone, and yet she felt utterly isolated in a sea of people. But just when it seemed the girl had been silenced for good, Maya's phone trembled in her hand as she pressed the number she knew by heart. Her father answered on the second ring, his deep voice steady and calm, the same voice that had carried him through boardrooms and battles few had believed he could win. She spoke quickly, her words breaking with emotion. Within minutes, everything began to change. The guards still held her near the corridor when a group of executives in tailored suits appeared at the gate, their presence commanding instant attention. Murmurs swept through the crowd like a wave. Passengers craned their necks, cameras zooming in. Something big was happening. At the center of the group walked a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet authority. His gaze was sharp, his stride purposeful. He didn't need a uniform to show who he was. Whispers spread. "Is that the CEO?" The flight attendant smirked when he approached, assuming he had come to support her. "Sir, I was just handling a situation. This girl tried to use a forged first-class ticket." But her words faltered when the man's eyes met hers, cold, and the silence at the gate didn't last long. Within hours, the videos passengers had recorded flooded social media, each clip capturing the flight attendant's sneer, the tearing of the ticket, and the moment the airline's CEO revealed the girl was his daughter. Outrage ignited like wildfire. Hashtags trended across platforms. Ticket torn, justice at the gate, dignity first. News anchors replayed the footage on loop, their voices heavy with condemnation. Commentators debated not just the cruelty of one employee, but the deeper prejudice that echoed through the skies. "This is bigger than one incident," one journalist declared. "It's a reflection of the assumptions too many people still carry." The airline scrambled to contain the fallout. Press conferences were held, public apologies issued, promises of reform declared. Yet it was clear, the damage had already been done. But for Maya and her father, the moment became more than scandal. It became a platform. Standing before cameras, he spoke with the calm gravity of a man who had endured this fight before. "My daughter's dignity was torn alongside that ticket. But this isn't just her story. It belongs to every traveler ever told they don't belong. To every voice silenced by arrogance disguised as authority." The crowd erupted in applause. Across the globe, people shared their own stories of discrimination, pouring them into comment sections, blogs, and videos. What began as humiliation at a single gate had transformed into a movement. Airports, airlines, and industries beyond aviation felt the ripple. Diversity trainings were called for, policies reviewed. Conversations started in living rooms, classrooms, and boardrooms alike. And in the center of it, all stood Maya, once silenced, now a symbol of dignity unshaken. But the final lesson this father delivered would echo far beyond the walls of an airport. In the days that followed, the scandal refused to fade. Yet rather than drown in the noise, Maya's father chose to rise above it. He didn't call for vengeance, nor did he let anger lead his words. Standing before a sea of microphones, he spoke not as a billionaire, not even as an airline owner, but as a father and as a man who had walked through the fire of prejudice himself. "They tore a ticket," he began, his voice calm, steady. "But what they truly tried to tear was dignity. And dignity does not belong to an airline, or a class of service, or a uniform. It belongs to every human being." The room fell silent, reporters hanging on to every syllable. He reminded the world that power and money were fleeting. But respect, the simple recognition of another's humanity, was priceless. He told them of his early years, of doors slammed in his face, of opportunities stolen, and of the vow he made that his children would never have to endure the same. Maya stood beside him, quiet but unbowed. In her eyes shone not just the pain of what she had endured, but the resilience her father had instilled in her. She had learned that day that humiliation can be loud, but dignity speaks louder still. Her father closed with words that would replay across countless screens. If you judge someone, let it be by their kindness.
If you deny someone, let it never be their humanity, because without respect, the skies themselves mean nothing. The applause that followed was more than support. It was a collective exhale, a recognition that something larger than an airline
ticket had been restored. And as the world reflected on this viral story, the story that began with a torn ticket ended with a message far stronger than paper could ever hold. What unfolded at that gate was more than humiliation and confrontation. It became proof that prejudice, no matter how casual or disguised, cannot stand against truth and dignity. Maya's quiet strength, her refusal to crumble under the weight of injustice, reminded millions that silence in the face of cruelty is never the answer. Her father's calm yet powerful response showed that true authority is not in uniforms or titles, but in the courage to speak for what is right. Justice had been served, but the lesson reached far beyond one airline or one flight attendant. It was a reminder for everyone watching. Respect should never be conditional, and humanity must always rise above hate. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to hear that dignity is stronger than discrimination. Add your voice to the conversation, because change grows louder when many speak together. And if you believe in stories that expose injustice, uplift resilience, and celebrate the triumph of dignity, join this community. Subscribe, share, and be part of a movement that says loudly and clearly, no one can rip apart what makes us human. Because in the end, tickets can be torn, but dignity cannot.